My name is Sarah, and for the longest time I feel ashamed to tell my story of my own mother. The woman that gave birth to me poisoned me for her affair with my husband. This is my story. I had what seemed like the perfect life. I was married to my husband, James, in the beautiful, quiet suburbs of Denver, Colorado. Our house, nestled on a tree-lined street, was the kind of place people would dream of raising a family. We had a beautiful daughter, Emily, a little girl with the brightest smile and a heart full of laughter. Everything was perfect. At least that's what I thought. I loved my family, and I trusted them with everything in me. That's why, when I look back now, it feels like my entire world has been turned upside down, like someone took my life and turned it into a nightmare, one horrifying revelation at a time. But this wasn't a stranger's betrayal. No, this betrayal came from someone I never expected. Someone I thought I could never, ever imagine hurting me. It was my mother. And it wasn't just any betrayal, it was the betrayal. My mother poisoned me. I can hear you asking, why? Why would she do something so horrific? And that, my friend, is what will make your blood run cold, just like mine did when I realized the full extent of her cruelty. You see, my mother didn't just want to see me suffer. No, what she wanted was something far worse. She wanted my husband, my James, for herself. At first, I thought it was all in my head. You know how it is when you start noticing the little things, the odd behavior, the sideways glances, the quiet tension that fills a room without anyone saying a word. It's like your instincts start ringing alarm bells, but you keep ignoring them because you don't want to face the truth. I kept telling myself, no, Sarah, you're being paranoid. Your mom loves you. Your family is fine. But deep down, something didn't feel right. The first time I noticed it, I brushed it off. My mom started coming around more often, but it didn't seem like anything out of the ordinary. She'd offer to help with Emily or drop by to chat, and at first I was grateful. I didn't think much of it. After all, what mother wouldn't want to spend time with her daughter and grandchild? But then it started, the little things. My mom would visit and spend way too much time alone with James. She'd linger in the kitchen while I was doing other things, whispering, laughing too much, or just staring at him with this look in her eyes that I couldn't quite understand. It felt like a secret, something she wasn't supposed to be doing but couldn't help herself from doing. The worst part, James never seemed to notice. Or worse, he pretended not to notice. But I didn't want to believe it. I refused to believe it. After all, my mom was my best friend. She was the one who helped me plan my wedding, who cried when I gave birth to Emily, the one who always had my back. She was supposed to protect me. But then I started feeling off. At first, I thought it was just exhaustion. The stress of managing a home, being a mother, and keeping everything together. But when it didn't stop, when the nausea and dizziness kept creeping up on me day after day, I began to worry. What was happening to me? Why was I feeling like this? I went to the doctor, thinking it might be something simple, a stomach bug or maybe a vitamin deficiency. But that wasn't the case. The doctor's words hit me like a freight train. You've been poisoned. Poisoned. The air in the room seemed to thicken, my heart racing in my chest as I tried to process what he had just said. And then, as if the universe was mocking me, a memory surfaced. A memory of my mother, of her, offering me special herbal teas and homemade remedies for detoxification during the past few months. She had always insisted I needed them to cleanse my system, to feel better. I trusted her. I had no idea she was slowly killing me. But it wasn't just about the poison. Oh no, the poison was just the start of it. You see, as I lay in bed, barely able to keep my eyes open from the effects of the poison, the pieces started to fall into place. My mother wasn't just poisoning me for some twisted reason. No, she was doing it to get James, my husband, the man I loved more than anything in this world. She wanted him for herself. She was trying to remove me from the picture so that she could have him all to herself. And if poisoning me was the way to do it, then so be it. Can you imagine the gut-wrenching betrayal of it all? My own mother, the woman who gave me life, was willing to destroy me for her own selfish desires. I was broken. I didn't know who to turn to. The one person who was supposed to protect me was now the one who was trying to destroy everything I had. But it wasn't over, not by a long shot. I had a decision to make. Do I let this go? Do I let her win? Do I let her poison my life, my family, my marriage? or do I fight back? What would you do? I'm telling you right now, this story is far from over, and you need to stay with me to find out what happened next. I can't believe how deep this went, but I knew I had to do something. It was time for my revenge, and trust me, I wasn't going down without a fight. What would you do if your own mother did this to you? What would you do if the one person you trusted with your life turned into the very thing that was trying to destroy it? Leave your thoughts below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. You won't want to miss the shocking twists coming in the next part of this story. I promise you, this is only the beginning. I don't think I'll ever forget the day everything changed. It wasn't just the day I found out I was poisoned. It was the day I realized that the life I thought I had was nothing but a lie. Everything I believed in, everything I trusted, was slowly crumbling in front of my eyes. And it was all because of her. I couldn't believe it at first. I kept asking myself, how could she do this to me? Why would my mother, of all people, turn against me? But then the truth hit me like a ton of bricks, and I couldn't run from it anymore. My mom wasn't just poisoning me for some petty reason. No, it was much more sinister. She wanted my husband. She wanted James. And when I started to piece everything together, I realized just how deep this betrayal ran. I should have seen the signs earlier. Hell, I wanted to see them. But who would ever suspect their own mother of such twisted behavior? It wasn't just the strange herbal teas she'd been giving me, or the odd, almost secretive conversations between her and James that I dismissed as nothing more than friendly chatter. It was the fact that every time she came over, she had this way of looking at him, this look that made my blood run cold. She'd laugh at his jokes a little too long, touch his arm a little too much, and every time I ignored it. It's nothing, I told myself. It's just her being friendly. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Then I found the message. It wasn't by accident. I wasn't snooping. No, I wasn't that kind of person. But that day I came home early from running errands, and when I walked into the living room, I found James' phone lying on the couch. It wasn't unusual. He often left it behind while he played with Emily or went outside to work in the garden. But that day, something was different. The screen was unlocked, and right there in front of my eyes was a text message that made my stomach drop. It wasn't from a friend. It wasn't from anyone I recognized. It was from my mother. And the words on that screen were the ones I'll never forget. I miss you. When can we see each other again? It's killing me to be apart from you. Those words shattered me. They weren't just flirtatious. They weren't innocent. They were a confession, an admission that my worst fear was real. My mother and husband were having an affair. My heart pounded so hard in my chest that I could barely breathe. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone across the room. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I stood there frozen, the weight of the truth crashing over me. My own mother had crossed a line that no family should ever cross. And what made it worse? My husband, the man I trusted with my entire life, was the one she had chosen. I immediately confronted James. I couldn't keep it in any longer. I had to know the truth. So I walked into the kitchen where he was preparing dinner, and without a word, I threw the phone in front of him. His face went pale. I could see the guilt written all over his features, and I could hear the tremble in his voice when he tried to explain himself. Sarah, But I didn't let him finish. How long, James? How long has this been going on? I asked, my voice shaking. He stood there, silent. His eyes fell to the floor, unable to meet my gaze. And that's when I knew. The tears welled up in my eyes as the betrayal sank in deeper. How long? I repeated, this time louder. A few months, he finally whispered. It just happened, Sarah. I never meant for this to happen. A few months. Months. That meant this had been going on for months. All this time, while I thought everything was fine, my mother and husband were planning a life together. A life that didn't include me. I don't remember much of the rest of that night. I don't remember the argument that followed or the cold, empty silence that filled the space between us. What I do remember is the sense of betrayal that consumed me, a feeling I could never have imagined. But it didn't end there. The next few days were a blur of anger, confusion, and hurt. James tried to apologize, tried to make things right, but I couldn't look at him the same way. He was no longer the man I loved. He was just another part of the betrayal I couldn't escape from. I couldn't even bring myself to ask him why. What was the point? The truth was already clear. Then came the most devastating part, my mother. I had to confront her. I had to hear her say it. I couldn't live with the doubt anymore. So one morning, I went to her house. It was quiet, just the way it always had been when we visited. But as I walked into the living room, there she was, sitting in the same chair she always did, reading a book, acting like nothing had changed. I could barely speak. My hands were shaking, and I felt sick to my stomach just being in the same room as her. But I knew I had to do it. I had to face her, to hear the truth from her lips. "Mom, is it true?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked up at me, and for a moment I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd deny it. Maybe she'd apologize. Maybe she'd tell me it was all a mistake. But no, instead, she smiled. "Yes, Sarah," she said calmly, like it was no big deal. "It's true, I love James, I always have, and I want him for myself." My world shattered right there. My own mother, my mother, admitted to everything without a single ounce of remorse. She didn't even care how it affected me. She just wanted him. She was willing to destroy me to get what she wanted. What kind of mother does that to her own daughter? I didn't know how to respond. I didn't know what to say. The pain was unbearable, but I knew one thing for sure: I would never forgive her. And the revenge that followed, well, that's where things got darker. You won't believe what happened next. I promise you, this is just the beginning. Hit the subscribe button, leave a comment. Tell me, what would you do if your own mother betrayed you like this? I've spent countless nights lying awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to wrap my mind around what my mother did to me. It felt surreal, like I was trapped in some kind of sickening nightmare I couldn't escape. But the truth, it was even worse than I could have ever imagined. She poisoned me. I wish I could tell you that I woke up one morning and everything was fine, that I'd get over it, that my life would go back to normal, but I couldn't. My mother didn't just destroy my marriage, she destroyed my body. And for what? So she could have my husband. I thought I was just getting sick. Little things at first, nausea after meals, a headache that wouldn't go away. But the symptoms kept piling up, and soon I couldn't ignore them anymore. I couldn't even keep food down. My stomach felt like it was constantly in knots. I went from feeling nauseous to dizzy to weak. The kind of weakness that leaves you crawling to the bathroom, unable to stand up straight without swaying. James, he thought it was just stress. I thought so, too, until I could barely drag myself out of bed. You can only imagine the fear that started creeping into my chest. What if something's seriously wrong? I asked myself. What if it's more than just stress? One day, I couldn't even get out of bed. I was shaking all over, unable to stop the tremors in my hands. I went to the bathroom, looked in the mirror, and I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. My skin was pale, almost grayish, and my eyes were sunken. My cheeks were hollow, like I had lost all the energy I once had. The thing is, I had always been healthy. I never got sick. I ate well, exercised, and took care of myself. But now, I felt like my body was shutting down, piece by piece. I tried to ignore it for a while, hoping it would pass. But it didn't. It kept getting worse. So, I did what any desperate person would do. I went to the doctor. The appointment felt like it took forever. I was weak, barely able to sit up straight in the waiting room. And when I finally got into the exam room, I was relieved just to be sitting down, resting. The doctor didn't waste any time. He ran a few tests, blood work, urine tests, the usual stuff, but nothing could prepare me for what he said next. "You've been poisoned." My entire world froze. The words didn't sink in at first. Poisoned. My body felt like it was betraying me. But this was something different. The doctor wasn't sure what kind of poison it was, but the symptoms were clear. The dizziness, the nausea, the weakness, all of it pointed to poisoning. He mentioned something about toxins and chemicals, but my mind couldn't process it. I couldn't even focus on what he was saying after that. The only thing I could hear was the pounding of my own heartbeat in my ears. I left the office that day in a daze, my mind whirling with 1,000 questions. Who would do this to me? Why? But the answer was clear. My mother. I had been slowly dying, and she had been the one feeding me the poison. The one person I trusted with everything. The woman who had held me when I was a child, who told me stories at night and wiped away my tears. She had been slipping poison into my food and drinks, all while smiling at me like nothing was wrong. All while pretending to be the loving mother I had always known. I couldn't believe it. I thought about all the times she'd come over, offering me herbal teas and special remedies to help with my health. I thought about the jars of natural remedies she kept in her kitchen. I had no idea she was slowly killing me with every cup. I had trusted her. I had believed her when she said it would make me feel better. But it wasn't just about the poison. It was about why. Why would she do this to me? Why would she want to hurt me like this? And then the pieces started falling into place. The affair, the texts, the stolen moments between her and James that I had so foolishly ignored. It was all connected. My mother didn't just want to poison me because she was angry with me. No, it was much darker than that. She was trying to eliminate me. She wanted to take my place in my own home, in my own life. She wanted James. She wanted him for herself, and I was in the way. I wasn't just the daughter she once cherished. I was an obstacle to her getting what she wanted. So she poisoned me. She tried to take me out of the picture in the most insidious way possible. And the worst part, I had no idea how long it had been happening. How long had she been poisoning me? Was it in the teas she brought me months ago? Was it in the food she insisted I try? I thought about it for hours, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. My mind raced. The idea of my own mother doing something like this was too much to bear. The thought of her secretly wishing for my death, no, my demise, was enough to make me want to scream. But then something inside me clicked. If she thought she could get away with this, if she thought she could destroy my life and take everything I had, she was wrong. She had no idea who she was dealing with. I wasn't going down without a fight. And I had a plan. I wasn't just going to let this happen to me. I wasn't going to lie down and let her poison my life away while she and James continued their twisted affair behind my back. I was going to make sure she paid for what she did. I wasn't going to let her get away with destroying my family, my health, and my sanity. But I needed proof. I needed something concrete to expose her for the monster she had become. So I started investigating, quietly, carefully, gathering evidence that would destroy her. I needed to find the poison, the vials, the syringes, anything that would prove that my mother was the one behind all of this. And that's when I found it. One afternoon, while my mother was out shopping, I went into her house. I had to know the full extent of what she was hiding. I searched through her cabinets, her drawers, her kitchen, and then under the sink I found it. Vials, small, clear vials with a dark liquid inside. The same liquid that had been making me sick for months. It was the same thing she had been slipping into my food. The poison she had been using to try and kill me. In that moment, everything I thought I knew about my mother, everything I thought I understood about family, shattered. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was pure, unadulterated evil, and I couldn't let it go. I couldn't let her get away with it. So I did the only thing I could do. I began planning my revenge. I didn't know how it would unfold, but I knew I couldn't just walk away from this. I couldn't let her live her life as if nothing had happened. She had to pay for what she did to me. If you're wondering how far I was willing to go, trust me, I was ready to do anything. I was no longer the woman who let things slide. I was someone else now. Someone stronger, angrier, and hell-bent on making sure my mother paid for what she'd done. What would you do if your mother poisoned you? What would you do if the person who should have protected you was the one who tried to take your life? This isn't over. Stay tuned, because the next part of my story is going to leave you breathless. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to see what happens next. Trust me, you won't want to miss this. I'm not sure when it happened, when I stopped being the woman who once trusted everyone around her. It could have been the moment I learned my mother had poisoned me, or maybe it was when I realized just how deep the betrayal ran. But somewhere along the way, I became someone else. Someone darker, colder. Someone who wasn't afraid to do what was necessary to make things right. And as I sat in my mother's house, staring at those vials of poison I had discovered hidden under her kitchen sink. I knew my life would never be the same again. I needed to act, but acting wasn't as simple as confronting her or even confronting James. No, I had to outsmart them. I had to make sure they never saw it coming. I couldn't just expose them right away, because that would be too easy. The punishment had to be worse than that. It had to be something that would shake them to their core, make them realize just how far I was willing to go to protect what was mine. But first, I had to make sure I was safe. The last thing I needed was for my mother to find out I had discovered the truth. If she knew I was onto her, she'd be more dangerous than ever. She would stop at nothing to finish what she started. The days that followed felt like a blur. Every morning, I woke up with a sense of dread weighing down on me. My body was still weak from the poison, but something inside me had shifted. It was like a switch had flipped, and I was no longer the vulnerable woman lying in bed, helpless and afraid. No, I was a woman on a mission. A woman who was ready to do whatever it took to take back control. I knew I couldn't act right away. I had to plan. I had to gather more evidence, more ammunition to destroy their lives. But it wasn't just about the vials anymore. No, it was bigger than that. I needed to expose the affair. I needed to show James just how much my mother had been manipulating him, using him like a pawn in her twisted game. And my mother, needed to see just how far I was willing to go to make her pay. So I started watching. I watched James more closely. He was acting like everything was normal, going to work, coming home, smiling at me like nothing had happened. But every time I looked at him, I saw the man who had betrayed me. I saw the man who had chosen my mother over me, and it made my blood boil. But I couldn't confront him. Not yet. I needed him to feel the full weight of what he had done. I needed him to think I was still in love with him, still hopeful that things could go back to normal. I needed him to let his guard down. I needed him to believe that he still had the upper hand. And that's when the real planning began. I knew my mother would eventually come to see me, to check in on me, to make sure I was still sick. So I played the part. I played the role of the broken, poisoned woman, the one who still couldn't get out of bed without feeling dizzy or weak. I kept up the act, even when I felt stronger. I knew that if I could convince her I was still vulnerable, I'd have the perfect opportunity to turn the tables. When she finally came over, she seemed more relaxed than I had ever seen her. She was playing the role of the caring, worried mother, bringing me soup, offering to run errands, acting like she was the only one who truly cared about my well-being. But inside, I was laughing at the irony. She was the one who had caused all of this. She was the one who had poisoned me, yet here she was, pretending like she was still my mother. I let her think she was in control. I let her believe that she was getting away with it. Every time she came by, I played my part, acting like I was still sick, still weak. I could see the relief in her eyes every time I smiled and thanked her for the tea, for the care she was giving me. I could see the glint of satisfaction in her eyes, knowing she had successfully poisoned me, both my body and my mind. But I wasn't stupid. I knew that the longer I let this go on, the more dangerous it would become. So I set my plan into motion. One evening, when my mother was sitting with me, chatting away like nothing was wrong, I slipped something into her drink. It wasn't poison, no. It was something far more subtle, something that would make her nervous. I had a plan for her, too. I needed her to realize that I wasn't the same person she had manipulated before. I needed her to feel the same fear and helplessness I had felt. I needed to show her that she couldn't just destroy me and get away with it. And that's when the idea hit me. What if I made her think I was going to die? I didn't know if it would work, but I had to try. I needed to break her, emotionally, mentally. I needed to push her to the brink. I needed her to see the consequences of what she had done, and I needed her to feel the weight of her own actions. So I set the stage. I made sure she saw me deteriorating just as she had seen me before, weak, sick, on the verge of collapse. Every time she came over, I made sure to look paler, more exhausted, more fragile. I wanted her to believe that she was winning. I wanted her to feel like she had control, like she had broken me. But the twist, I wasn't sick anymore. I had stopped taking the poison, and every day I grew stronger. Slowly but surely, I regained my strength. My body began to recover, and as it did, so did my mind. The darkness that had clouded my thoughts was starting to lift, and the more I thought about what I had been through, the more determined I became. And then it happened. One day, while she was visiting me, I let her see it. I let her see that I was no longer the sick woman she had poisoned. I let her see the strength in my eyes, the strength that I had hidden for so long. And for the first time, I saw it in her eyes, too. Fear. Her expression faltered. The facade she had carefully built over the past months began to crumble. She could see it in my eyes. I was no longer the victim. I was no longer the weak, poisoned woman who couldn't stand up for herself. No, I was stronger than she could ever imagine. And that's when I made my move. I didn't just confront her. I didn't just accuse her of poisoning me or having an affair with James. No, I did something far worse. I showed her that I had been watching her all along. I showed her that I knew what she had done, that I had the evidence. I didn't need to say a word. I just let her see the look in my eyes, the look of someone who had been through hell but had come out the other side stronger. That moment was everything. My mother, the woman who had poisoned me, the woman who had tried to destroy my family, was now facing the consequences of her own actions. She could see that I was no longer afraid. She could see that I was no longer the woman she had once controlled. And it was beautiful. Stay with me, because the next part of my story will make your jaw drop. I'm about to make her pay in ways she never saw coming. Don't forget to like and subscribe, because this revenge is just getting started. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Let me know in the comments below. You know that feeling when the weight of betrayal crushes you, but you're too afraid to confront it because you're unsure how it will all end. The agony, the unanswered questions, and the crippling vulnerability. That was me. I had been broken, poisoned, and manipulated by my own mother and my husband, the two people I thought I could trust more than anyone else in the world. But after everything I'd been through, something inside me changed. The moment I stood in front of my mother and let her see the fire in my eyes, I knew I wasn't the victim anymore. I wasn't the helpless woman she had poisoned, slowly and painfully. I was in control. I had regained my strength, and I was about to make sure that they, the two people who had shattered me, would never see me as weak again. I was done playing nice. I was done pretending to be the sweet, innocent daughter who would let things slide. No, this wasn't about forgiveness anymore. This was about revenge. And trust me, when I tell you that I had a plan, I mean it. It wasn't just any plan. It was a calculated, precise strategy to destroy them both. My first move was to get inside their heads, to make them think they were still in control, to make them believe that I hadn't figured out what they'd done, that I hadn't discovered everything. I wasn't going to expose them right away. No, I needed them to feel safe, so safe that they wouldn't see the storm coming. James had been acting like nothing had happened, as if the affair never occurred, as if the poison I had ingested wasn't still lingering in my system. Every day, he would come home from work, kiss me on the cheek, and pretend everything was normal. He'd talk to me about trivial things, like the weather or work, completely ignoring the elephant in the room. The man I had once loved and trusted was now a stranger, someone who could betray me so deeply, and yet still play the role of the caring husband. But I wasn't fooled, not anymore. I played along just like I had with my mother. I acted like I was still the same woman, weak, sick, desperate for their attention. I kept up the charade, pretending that I didn't know. Every smile, every kind word from James, every fake display of concern, it made my skin crawl. But I kept up the act, drawing them in closer. The best part, James had no idea what was coming. He thought I was still the woman he had betrayed, the woman who had no clue. But the truth was, I was more aware of everything than he could ever imagine. I knew his every move, his every lie, his every whispered word to my mother. And now I was playing them like puppets on a string. My mother, oh, she had no idea what was coming. She thought she was in control, thought she had manipulated me into submission. But she didn't understand that I had become a different person. I wasn't the sweet little girl she once raised. No, I was the woman who was going to make her pay for everything she had done to me. The first part of my plan was simple. I had to gather all the evidence. I needed more than just the poison, more than just the affair. I needed something that would break them, something so damning that it would leave them both powerless, unable to wiggle their way out of it. So I started digging. I went through James's emails, his text messages, even his social media accounts. I didn't care how wrong it felt. I was no longer the woman who respected boundaries. I was the woman who would burn everything to the ground if it meant getting my revenge. And then I found it. A conversation between James and my mother. It was casual at first, nothing out of the ordinary. But as I read further, my heart stopped. It wasn't just an affair. No, this was worse. It was planned. They had been plotting this for months. My mother had been the mastermind behind everything, convincing James to keep the affair a secret, ensuring that I would never find out. She had even gone as far as poisoning me to make sure I would be weak enough to never fight back. I stared at the screen, rage bubbling up inside me. How could they? How could they think they could get away with this? But the real twist came when I realized something else in the conversation. My mother had been planning something else, something even more sinister. She was going to frame me for something I didn't do. She had arranged for a fake drug test, one that would make it look like I had been using illegal substances for months. She planned to have me arrested, to destroy my reputation completely. It wasn't just about stealing my husband. It was about destroying me, taking everything I had worked for, everything I had loved. The realization hit me like a sledgehammer. They weren't just trying to ruin my marriage. They were trying to ruin my life. That's when I knew the gloves were off. I wasn't going to just expose them. I was going to destroy them, slowly, methodically, until there was nothing left of the lives they had built on my suffering. The plan was simple, yet deadly. First, I would confront James, but not with anger, not with rage. I would confront him with calm, with control. I would make him believe that I was still the woman he could manipulate, that I hadn't figured out everything. But once he was vulnerable, once he thought he had me under his thumb again, that's when I would strike. And then I would confront my mother. She would never see it coming. I would expose her for what she truly was, the manipulative, selfish woman who had destroyed her own daughter's life for her own gain. But I needed one final thing. I needed them to feel the consequences of their actions. I needed to make them suffer, slowly, painfully, in a way that would make them regret every single thing they had done. So I did something no one saw coming. I went to the police. I showed them everything, the emails, the texts, the evidence of the affair, the poisoning, and the plan to frame me. But I didn't stop there. I made sure to tell them about my mother's plans to ruin my reputation. The authorities couldn't ignore it, and that's when things really started to unravel. James and my mother were arrested. They were both charged with conspiracy to commit assault, drugging, and more. Their lives were over, and it was all because of me. But the satisfaction of seeing them fall, that wasn't enough. I needed more. I wanted them to understand what it felt like to be completely powerless, to know that they were nothing without their lies and manipulation. And that's when I took it a step further. I made sure the entire world knew what they had done to me. I leaked the story to the media. The affair, the poisoning, the manipulation, it was all there for everyone to see. James and my mother became pariahs. No one wanted to be associated with them. They were shunned, vilified, and publicly humiliated. Everything they had worked for, everything they had destroyed my life for, was gone in an instant. As I watched them crumble, I couldn't help but smile. It was over. They had paid for their betrayal. They had paid for every lie, every drop of poison, and every whispered word behind my back. Revenge, it wasn't just sweet, it was necessary. And for the first time in months, I felt free. Stay with me because this isn't the end. What would you do if you had the chance to take back your life from the people who tried to destroy you? Let me know your thoughts below. If you're loving this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. You think you've reached the peak of something, the moment when the story is over and you're finally free. You've outsmarted your enemies, exposed them, and watched them pay for the pain they caused you. You tell yourself it's done. That victory is sweet, and now, at last, you can breathe easy. But what they don't tell you is that revenge isn't always as satisfying as it seems. Sure, it feels good for a while. The power, the control, it's intoxicating. But then the dust settles, and you're left staring at the wreckage of everything you once knew. I thought I'd feel a sense of closure, that after everything I'd been through, after everything I'd done, I'd be able to rest easy. But instead, the more I thought about it, the more it hit me. What now? My mother was arrested. James was arrested. Their lives were in ruins, and it was all because of me. They had been publicly humiliated, destroyed by the very secrets they tried to keep hidden. I should have felt relief, right? I should have been dancing in the streets, celebrating my victory. But I was. I was left alone with my thoughts, my feelings, and the aftermath of a war I didn't choose to fight. As I watched everything fall apart for them, I couldn't shake the emptiness in my chest. I had spent so long obsessing over what they'd done to me, my mother's betrayal, James's affair, the poisoning, that I hadn't stopped to think about what would happen when it was all over. When they were gone, what would I have left? Emily, my daughter, had seen everything. She was too young to fully understand the gravity of what had happened, but she could feel it. Her world had been turned upside down, and no matter how much I tried to shield her from it, I couldn't protect her from the reality that her family was shattered. I had to be strong for her. But how do you heal when you've been broken so deeply? How do you move on when the people you trusted most in the world have betrayed you in ways you never thought possible? As days turned into weeks, I found myself questioning everything. Had I done the right thing? Was this the justice I deserved? Or had I crossed a line? I thought revenge would bring me peace, but instead, it brought nothing but more questions and more regret. James and my mother, both arrested, both facing charges that would ruin their lives, were now paying for what they'd done to me. But there was a part of me that wondered, was this really enough? The day I got the call from the prosecutor's office, I realized that nothing would ever be the same. The trial was set. They would face the consequences of their actions, and I'd be forced to testify. I had already given all the evidence, the texts, the emails, the vials of poison, and the case was strong. I was going to win. But as the days ticked closer to the trial, I started to wonder if I was prepared for what was coming. What would it be like to sit in that courtroom, staring across the aisle at the people who had destroyed my life, watching them squirm as they faced their fate? For the first time, I started to feel the weight of it all. The guilt, the anger, the sadness, it all came crashing down. But more than that, I felt the loneliness, the isolation. I had burned every bridge with the people I loved most. I had sacrificed my relationship with my mother, the woman who raised me, for justice. I had sacrificed my marriage for revenge, and now I was left with nothing. But that wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was realizing that, even though they were gone, my mother locked up, James facing charges, the hole they left in my life couldn't be filled by their destruction. No amount of revenge could take away the ache in my heart. The truth was, I had been so consumed by the need for vengeance that I hadn't stopped to think about what life would look like once it was all over. What do you do when your world falls apart? What do you do when you've gotten everything you wanted but still feel empty? I remember the night before the trial, when I sat in the dark in my living room, staring at the empty space where James had once sat. I thought about the man I had married, the man I had trusted with everything I had, and the man who had shattered me. Was this really the justice I wanted? I didn't have the answers. I didn't know if I could ever feel whole again. All I knew was that I couldn't undo the damage I had done. I couldn't take back the pain I had caused, and I couldn't erase the tears Emily had cried. I couldn't rebuild my family. As the trial began the next morning, I walked into that courtroom with my head held high. I was strong, confident, and determined. But as I took my seat and looked across the room, I saw my mother sitting in the defendant's chair. She was pale, her eyes red from crying, and I couldn't help but wonder if she regretted what she had done. Did she feel the weight of the choices she had made? Was she truly sorry for trying to destroy me? The sight of her made my stomach churn, but there was something else, too. Sadness. I had spent so much time hatting her, wanting her to pay, but now I realized I didn't want to see her like this. I didn't want to see her broken, even if she deserved it. The trial was brutal. The defense tried to discredit me, tried to paint me as a woman scorned, desperate for revenge. But I didn't care about their lies. I had the truth on my side. The evidence was undeniable. But even as the judge pronounced my victory, as I saw my mother and James led away in handcuffs, I didn't feel the rush of satisfaction I thought I would. Instead, I felt a crushing sense of loss. The battle was over, but the war within me raged on. I had gotten what I wanted: revenge, justice, retribution. But it didn't heal the wounds inside me. It didn't undo the damage. It didn't bring back the family I had lost. And that's when I realized something I hadn't expected. Revenge doesn't fix everything. It doesn't heal the pain. It doesn't give you back what you've lost. As I stood in the courtroom, watching my mother and husband led away, I realized that the real punishment wasn't their downfall. The real punishment was living with the consequences of my own actions. Was this worth it? I didn't know, but I knew one thing for sure: I had to keep moving forward. For Emily, for myself, for whatever life I could still salvage. The battle was over, but the real work was just beginning. You know, when I was in the middle of everything, the poison, the lies, the betrayal, I never thought I'd come out the other side. It felt like I was stuck in an endless cycle of pain and revenge, trapped in a story where the plot was always spiraling downward. The only thing that kept me going was the idea of justice, the idea that once I saw them pay for what they did, I'd be able to breathe again. I thought that the moment I saw my mother and James fall, the heaviness on my chest would disappear. I thought that revenge would heal the wounds they had left in me. But as it turns out, revenge is a fickle thing. It can burn bright for a moment, lighting the way through the darkness, but in the end, it leaves you with ashes. And that's where I found myself, standing amidst the ruins of my family, with nothing left but the ghosts of what used to be. The trial was over. My mother and husband were both behind bars, their lives destroyed, just as I had wanted. But with their fall came a suffocating silence, a silence that made me realize something I hadn't been prepared for. I was alone. No one talks about the loneliness that comes after the storm has passed. After you've exacted your revenge and seen your enemies crumble, you're left standing in the aftermath, staring at the wreckage of your life. The echoes of betrayal and anger fade, but they're replaced by something worse: emptiness. I had my daughter, Emily, of course. She was my rock, but I couldn't pretend that everything was fine. I couldn't lie to myself anymore. The world I once knew was gone, and the family I once had was no more. I had broken it all down, piece by piece, to satisfy a need for justice that had, in the end, cost me everything I held dear. I remember one night, weeks after the trial had ended, sitting in my living room alone. Emily was in bed, and the house was quiet, eerily so. I had grown so used to the chaos, the anger, and the revenge that the silence felt suffocating. It felt like a weight on my chest, pressing down on me with every passing second. I thought about what my life had become. For months, all I could focus on was them: my mother, my husband, what they had done to me, what I had to do to make them pay. But now I had no one left to blame. I had no more enemies to fight. It was just me. And in that moment, I realized something. I needed to forgive. Forgiving them wasn't about letting them off the hook. It wasn't about forgetting what they had done to me or pretending like it never happened. Forgiveness was something I had to give myself. I had to forgive myself for letting this go on for so long, for allowing my life to be consumed by the need for revenge. I had to forgive myself for losing sight of who I was in the process. It wasn't easy. It still is. But as I sat in that empty room, the silence pressing in on me, I understood that healing was the next step. Revenge had been my way of surviving. It had been my armor. But armor isn't meant to be worn forever. Eventually, you have to put it down and let yourself feel again. The first step towards healing was understanding that I wasn't just a victim. I wasn't the woman who had been poisoned, the woman whose family had betrayed her. I was more than that. I was stronger than that. And as much as it hurt, I had to let go of the anger that had been driving me. But how do you move on when everything you've ever known is shattered? How do you rebuild your life from the ground up? The answer wasn't simple, but it started with one small decision: to let go. I knew I had to let go of my need for revenge. I had to stop letting it consume me. For so long, it had been the only thing that kept me going, the only thing that gave me purpose. But now it was a weight around my neck, holding me back from moving forward. I took a deep breath and made a promise to myself that night. I promised that I would rebuild. I promised that I would start fresh, not for anyone else, but for me. I couldn't change what had happened, but I could change how I moved forward. I could choose to live a life that wasn't defined by anger, by betrayal, by revenge. The next day, I began to make small changes. I started seeing a therapist to work through the trauma of the past months. I knew I couldn't do it alone. I needed help to unpack the emotional weight I had been carrying around for so long. I started going for walks in the mornings, letting the fresh air clear my mind. I spent more time with Emily, focusing on rebuilding our relationship. I knew that if I was going to heal, I had to give her my undivided attention. And slowly, little by little, things started to shift. The anger began to fade. The weight of the past started to lift. It wasn't immediate. It didn't happen overnight, but with each passing day, I felt lighter, more at peace. But just when I thought I was finally starting to heal, something unexpected happened. One afternoon, I received a letter in the mail. It was from my mother. I had no idea what to expect. I hadn't heard from her since the trial, and after everything that had happened, I wasn't sure if I ever wanted to hear from her again. But I opened the letter anyway, my heart pounding in my chest. Inside was a simple message. I am sorry, I was wrong. I know I have destroyed everything and I can't undo the damage. But I still love you, Sarah. I always have. I hope one day you can forgive me. Please don't shut me out forever. I am here, waiting whenever you're ready to talk. It was a small gesture, a faint glimmer of hope. But for the first time in a long while, I felt something stir inside me. Not anger, not hatred, but something else. Forgiveness. I wasn't ready to forgive her, not yet. But I was willing to try. I knew that I couldn't keep living with the anger and bitterness that had consumed me for so long. It wasn't about letting her off the hook. It was about me letting go, about finding peace within myself. I didn't respond right away. I didn't know if I was ready to face her again, but the fact that she had reached out made me realize something important. Healing wasn't just about letting go of the past. It was about opening the door to a future where I could move forward, even if it meant facing the painful reality of what had happened. And so, for the first time in months, I allowed myself to feel hope. Not for my mother's forgiveness, no, not yet, but for my own. I knew that my journey wasn't over. I had a long way to go before I could fully heal, but I was ready to take the first step. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. There would be bumps, there would be setbacks, and there would be days when I would want to give up. But I had made it this far, and that meant something. I had survived the worst. I had fought for my life, for my family, for my future. And now it was time to rebuild. What would you do if you were given a second chance to rebuild your life? Could you forgive the people who hurt you most? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. This journey is far from over, but I'm ready to walk it, one step at a time.